Hello and welcome to Shoot the Sh, the podcast where I interview men because I want men to talk. This is episode 6. I'm joined by Jeremy Lyons. First of all, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. I was just saying before, this is a exciting podcast for me, as Jeremy is my first guest that I've had no previous knowledge of his life or anything that he's done. He's just someone that I reached out to on LinkedIn. So this is my first podcast with a stranger. But yeah, I'm excited to get into it, and I'm excited to hear about you, Jeremy. So first of all, let's have a little bit of an intro. Who is Jeremy? What is he about, and what's his story?
Sure, and a big question. So I guess in a sense of how I've come into kind of working in the space of men and mental health and that sort of thing, I can talk about that. But I'm sure we can talk about more kind of general journey as well. But in terms of mental health, so I actually I did engineering at uni, nothing completely away from mental health or anything like that. And then I went on after that to kind of work in the city and do stuff with commercial roles and stuff like that, completely away from mental health. Then COVID came, and I realised what I found most interesting, whether it was at uni or in the workspace, was actually conversations with people and working with people at a basic level. But then when things were becoming more specific in terms of mental health, I really started to realise I found a passion in that. So I did some volunteering, but that wasn't enough, and I wanted to give a lot more to it. And so I then went on to do a master's in psychology. And in doing that, kind of got more into my interest with mental health and psychology and volunteering, working with amazing organisations, and started up working some stuff with students. And I could see definitely certain groups had a lot more stigma and barriers around that, men being one of them. And so some passions definitely came around working in that sort of space. And now I work with an amazing charity called Beyond Equality, working with kind of schools, universities, organisations on kind of facilitating groups for men to be able to speak about all sorts of things, mental health, masculinity, and stuff like that.
Amazing. So I guess the first point that I want to sort of touch on is COVID. I guess the big C word. That was obviously that was probably a big time for a lot of people. I think there was a huge shift in working environment, and for some people in some unfortunate situations, a lot of additional pressures just from not just the lockdown itself. Is that something that how was your experience with lockdown? What was your experience with lockdown like?
Yeah, it's a good question. And so I guess, so for me, I was lucky enough that I was able to continue working through most of lockdown. So I was working kind of in a commercial sort of, it's basically a sales role where a lot of that was kind of, whether it was LinkedIn, emails, calls and things like that, all things that could be done from home. So from that point of view, I felt very kind of grateful that I was even able to work. A lot of people weren't. There was maybe like a month in total of furlough, and even that was, again, I felt lucky to have had that support. But what it did mean was that I think for a lot of people, it gave me more time outside of work and looking at the conversations and kind of the big picture stuff that was happening in conversations around, do I want to be doing this? With it feeling not as kind of secure and just going through the motions where it was up in the air, what would be happening. And that's what kind of got me, as I say, to be thinking about what I really find interest in doing. And as I say, there's obviously more conversations around mental health because so many people were not as lucky as I was. And so that definitely got me to have kind of quicker levels of burning out. Yeah. Just because I didn't feel a great sense of purpose in doing the work I was doing. And that definitely was a big factor, like I say, to go in the direction I'm going now. But I do feel very lucky personally from what I had.
Yeah, I think COVID for me was an interesting time. I was a small, still I'm a small business owner, but my small business at the time, it was a bit of a pressure. Initially there was no like support or anything like that. We were the last on the chain, so to speak. But yeah, it was a great experience. I think when I look at it as a whole, and we look at the mental health that sort of came out of it, I think for me that's where I started to take a little bit of an interest in mental health, and I also noticed a peak in it becoming a bit more of a buzzword. I think it really was a case of, like you said, you either had that opportunity to, you might have been on furlough and you might have been like, well, what can I do to better myself, or am I actually in love with the job that I'm doing? And you then also had the polar opposite of that, where some people's stresses were so magnified and so elevated that it almost became a melting pot of people sort of being put under substantial mental health pressures. I was in a, I was living in London at the time, and it's obviously not a cheap place to live, and it's when you don't have the enjoyment of everything that's outside of London, it's like, what am I paying hundreds, if not thousands, of pounds a month for? That is
Yeah.
just a room, and I'm still doing the same thing. So there was obviously that big shift of people moving out of London and stuff like that. But it was that interest for me. That was the interesting thing, was that mental health, or that perception of just looking at yourself or having additional pressures, was just magnified through COVID. And that's, I wouldn't say I was grateful for COVID, because there's obviously other sides to it, but for me personally, it was a nice journey to go on. So for you, it was a case of, right, I want to move into a more sphere of this space. So how did that journey come about? How easy was that? Like, what were your challenges?
Yeah, so it's a good question. So I kind of alluded to a little bit of experience with it. So at uni, I said I did 4 years actually of engineering. So I got a master's in that. Some of that was based in my own interest from school and things like that. I like understanding how things work, and some of it was kind of this general idea of the kind of careers that have the best potential, and that was a lot of what was driving me. But outside of it, say I did some volunteering with Crisis Text Line, something called Shout, and so that's people come in, with crisis, but also just sometimes things have conversation. It's a bit of volunteering I did, and I really enjoyed that. I spent a summer doing a placement where it was kind of with the college I was with, looking at resilience and kind of how the wellbeing system's working at the uni, whilst most of my friends were doing kind of cool aerospace projects and things, and that's just where my attention was going for some reason. And so I had a bit of experience there. I also took an extra module in psychology, just little bits and pieces. And so I had a bit of an understanding of that, and my girlfriend as well was doing psychology. So again, just from her kind of uni days and kind of what she was doing at work, again, I saw what careers look like and career routes, which can be very confusing if you don't have anyone to speak to about it directly.
Yeah.
And when I was on that furlough period, I basically applied to do a conversion, so you can convert psychology in 1 year, and you need the degree to be able to go on and become a therapist and that sort of thing. So yeah, I applied and luckily got in, and was able to to leave my job and do that 1 year conversion, also over COVID.
Amazing. So obviously there's that interest there. Was that just purely interest, or is that stemmed from something? What was the draw to that side of things?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I think now that I'm much more within the space, whether that's kind of from a studying perspective, having done that, or more actually kind of working with people, I realise there are loads of elements of, I guess, experience, identity, community, that have been quite personal to me. So, for example, obviously there is the issue of the stigma around men's mental health. I think also racialised communities. Another big one for me is neurodiversity. So that's a bit of a buzzword, particularly in corporate spaces. When I say buzzword, just in terms of things people may have heard of, but not what it means.
Yeah.
So I have dyslexia and ADHD. And so through school, for me, that was various things of having enough extra time, having a bit of extra time. Many people would have seen it through that lens, but also some stuff about expectations of how I was behaving quite young, quite erratic, and things like that. Loads of emotional stuff come with having ADHD, for example, as well as the reading and writing with dyslexia. And overcoming all of that, I think I was lucky in being able to do that. But I've seen a lot of kids that I work with these days as well that don't have that luck if they aren't kind of doing well at school because of learning difficulties. And in the workplace, again, if reasonable adjustments aren't there, people can really really struggle. And so I found all these different communities that were being particularly affected by with their mental health that I felt I connected to, and I've had the opportunity and privilege to overcome those spaces, and I really want to share that within that space. I felt like I had a unique perspective on certain things compared to other people's experiences, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic because school is such a, to be honest with you, it's arguably one of the toughest environments to be a to be a part of. As a children are quite cruel. So I think most children go through some form of bullying or some sort of picking on at any point in their sort of journey through school. But it's interesting that that's now where you've sort of gone full circle, and where you're working towards is with that side of things, and trying to actually sort of help that side of things. What is the goal with that? Because I think we're finally coming through a phase of, I guess, societal pressure where education is the most important thing, and like leaving school with 3 A levels and going on to do a degree is no longer the holy grail of what's needed. So what is it that's sort of changing now within schools that you're seeing that is helping those sort of sets of people?
Yeah, no, it's a really good point, and I think there are two things to separate, I guess, with school, in the sense that, like you say, there's very much going to focus on attainment, to the degree to which that's get these grades, go to these, whether it's higher education, college, apprenticeships, whatever, and then continue to value yourself on how much money you can make in X number of careers. I do think schools play a fundamental role in a sense of development, community, these sort of values that we're now starting to champion in the workplace and wider society. So I think, my experience kind of doing workshops and volunteering with schools shows that, I mean, everyone knows, and we're starting to know anyway, that teachers are really some of the pillars of what we can do right, and in terms of their impact on development of children, young people. And there's so much pastoral care that goes into that, whether it's stuff around emotional intelligence that, again, is like much more of a complicated concept as adults, but really starts from that age. Support of kind of how you're interacting, socializing with other kids. I think there's so much emotional, pastoral, mentorship-based things at school that are educational to an extent, but aren't about kind of attainments, exams, careers, but will give you dividends in those things and way beyond that in terms of family and stuff. And I still think it's just kind of adding to existing systems like schools rather than kind of working against them or working against each other. And I think that is the aim, to make, whether it's kind of curriculum, PSHE, whether it's just working with organisations together, community-based stuff like councils and stuff, just working with things that are working, rather than this competition idea of this is the right way or this is the right way. I hope that made some sense.
Yeah, I think it's important that it's interlocked. You don't want like different ideologies. That's really important. I think for me, I'm the back end of the millennial generation. I think I just creep in. So I'm like 92. So for me, school was just sort of like, I wouldn't say that I had any of that experience or anything. Like, we did like one of those PGSCEs, however many letters were in it whenever I was there. But it was never really talking about that side of things. And I think for me now, as a young adult, looking at my mental health and starting to have that relationship with it, I look back at all of the, I guess, shit that I went through as a kid, and all of the shit that I went through as a teen, and all the shit that I went through when I was at uni and sort of my early career. And I'm like, if someone had just said, like, you will have ebbs and flows, you will have negative things that happen in life, and you just need to assess them as a whole picture, rather than this little insular moment that in that phase was essentially the end of the world, I think it would be significantly better. And we the whole thing for this is men's mental health, and what I'm learning and what I'm hoping is the case, and hopefully you'll put my mind at rest a little bit more, is that young men and young boys are given the tools at an earlier age to actually start to deal with things and start to move with things, so that my focus can be on men as a generation that is in sort of my age, and try and just get them to talk about anything really. I think that's the biggest thing. I think is we're very insular as a gender really in most cases. Yeah. So yeah, and just to go back on that and ask that question, is that the case? Do you feel that we're equipping young men a lot more? What's your views on that?
Yeah, I'm sure it's going to vary on lots of things, people's different personal experiences, the schools, what's being offered, what else they're dealing with. Because a lot of people, sometimes people just have to deal with school in a sense of I can just focus on what I've got to study. Sometimes there's sports, sometimes there's this work being done by schools to kind of make them more well-rounded people. Sometimes people have got a lot of stuff going on at home, parents, other situations. So it will vary, but I think in terms of, for example, my experience, what I'm doing now with schools, yeah, more money and resources and attention to be putting into making them not feel, school does 100% everything, particularly in terms of the schoolwork, and actually here are your different options to be, one, to define yourself as a man. So a lot of work I do, the first thing we do is get them to define what they think of as a man, get them to maybe question those things. That there's day called the man box. What boxes you in as a man? Got to be tall, strong, earning X amount of money. Why do we have these things? What are we afraid of if we don't have all these things? Opening it up as well to, what different types of people are we not letting in that kind of idea of being a man, and you're not letting yourself in, and really just opening that up, and then, but also keeping what's important. What do you like about being a man, and not necessarily making it a dirty word for them as well. So there's some sort of, sense of a positive role modeling that they can make or they can look up to. A lot of that's challenging stuff on social media. That's a big impact. Obviously, you've got the Andrew Tates and similar type of things like that. So there's a lot to unpack as well. I think before there wasn't enough conversation about these sort of bigger themes. Now there is more, but it's just obviously more complex with this stuff coming in through TikTok and Instagram and stuff like that. So there's that. But I am, to answer your question, generally more optimistic. One, that they're having these conversations in the first place, however much there is to unpack, that things will be questioned at this age. Things like emotional intelligence, like, yes, I'll get in one session kids talking about these very rigid stereotypes that are harmful. But then we talk about, talking about emotions, being able to cry, the suicide rates. You can see they're understanding that more. They're more used to that kind of conversation, even at a very young age. I'm talking 13, 14. And it can be really quite powerful just having hour sessions where you're facilitating them speaking rather than teaching at them. Because they're used to getting content either from teachers or from socials, not actually exploring that and challenging their own thoughts. So that's helping a lot more critical thinking in a real sense. So I hope that answers it a little bit.
Yeah, it does. I think you touched on a few things. In a previous podcast, I was speaking with Dan, who's a friend of mine from school, and we were talking about that 1% and that social pressure that sort of is alluded to from social media. And Dan does very well. He works within the police. He's got a good job. He's got a loving partner. He's got 2 daughters, and he's a very happy man now. Like, he works on his mental health. He has counselling, and he does X, Y, and Z. But overarchingly, he's a happy man, and he's comfortable in his skin, and he's comfortable in where he is in life. And I think that, for me, is one of the biggest things that I want to get out of this, because I come from a maths background. So, like, for me, people that want to be in this 1%, it's like, it just doesn't work. It's just not mathematically possible for everyone to be there. And if everyone was there, then there'd be a new 1% that was even further away. So yeah, I think it's really important that we start having honest conversations and not be like, because I don't know if this is the case. It'd be interesting to know that especially with the kids sort of being maybe a bit of peer pressure, they might not want to say, "Oh, I don't want to earn loads of money. I just want to do X, Y, and Z and have a loving family." Be interesting to know if there is that starting to come through. But yeah, that for me is a really big goal of this. Is like, it's okay to be a man. It's okay to earn good money. It's okay to look after your family. It's okay to go to the gym once a week if that's what you want to do. It's okay to go to the pub and have 5 beers. As long as you're happy and content in your life and you're providing the value that you want to do, then you've done it. You've achieved happiness to an extent. Like, you're not, no one's 100% happy because that's just life, but that's a big thing for me. So it'd be interesting to see if it's still that everyone's still after that North Star because you're youthful and your dreams are big, or even at that age there's a
Yeah.
real.
Yeah, I think it varies, is what I would say. I think people are more aware of the alternatives, in the sense that people are aware of the ideas of the difference between, working for kind of just for the money of it, and the ideas of satisfaction, the importance of that, the different ways you can live your life. There's more of an awareness of that, but there is a fair amount of resistance to that, just because there's also all this about women want a certain thing, if that's who they're looking to attract, or with everything going on kind of in a bigger scale, you need to earn money to be able to do X, Y, and Z. So I think they're aware of it, and sometimes they are able to integrate parts of that in terms of the hopes and dreams. But it's also this massive cynicism, which again I think is brought out by the entry-states of the world, where it's like, no, this is the world. It's a dog-eat-dog world, and you've got to earn enough money so you're in power and you're in control, and all that sort of language that to me reads they're a bit fearful of not being that way, and sometimes it's being fearful of being almost chastised for being men. So you can't be men, you can't do this, and there's all these things that mean that they're not safe in some way, so they've got to take back direction and power. And it's understandable where it comes from, but it obviously develops into something that's very dangerous for themselves. And so I think, as I say, I think it will be a process. It will be a process, but I think things like the awareness around whether it is, the suicide rates, or just the general importance of happiness more, whether it's role models, celebrities, sports stars, whoever, opening up just about mental health. You got, your Tyson Furies and so many others. I think it's become more acceptable, like I say, to have the conversations and look up to people outside of the 1%, and entertain type people, my way or the highway, and more people just advocating for just the average person to have, kind of positive things. So it's getting there. There is resistance to it, but it's getting there.
Yeah, I think like I'm so torn with Andrew Tate. Like, it's I understand why people hate him, and I understand why people love him, and I'm probably in the minority that is undecided, because you're right. Like, we need to be happy. You still have to have goals, and you still have to work towards them, and you still have to achieve things. It's not like, if you just sit there and you just don't do anything, then you're naturally going to be not too happy with life and what the outcome is, if you're expecting it to come to you. Like, these things don't come easy. You still have to strive and achieve. And I think, for me, there's a real sector that I think goes within sort of the male community that really goes, that is probably the least likely to seek support, is probably the least likely to have these conversations, is probably the least likely to see this podcast, is that lower economic side of things, where it is almost like working class. I think Jordan Peters talks about, those are the men that are what drive this world forward, and probably, like you touch on, are probably the ones that are more likely into being that suicide section, and trying to sort of strive and trying to move forward and trying to provide, and it's almost a fight for them in every day. And I think, yeah, they need more role models like a Tyson Fury, or more role models within things that they interact with, to start to drag that out and start to encourage that. And I really do hope that I can reach people like that, and we can start to have conversations. But I've had conversations with my ex-partner when we were across from our flat. There was a building site, and they were chucking up a huge skyscraper of obviously a new block of flats. And we were talking about this podcast and talking about what I'm trying to achieve and trying to get men to talk. And I was like, it must be so hard for that man there who's operating that crane, who's probably going through some shit, who's probably thinking, I need to talk to someone. But he's operating a crane that's carrying a 2.5 ton pillar with 4 other blokes above it. So if he goes to the pub after work with those 4 blokes and he goes, you know what, guys, I'm not feeling X, Y, and Z, the next day they're going to be like, watch out for this pillar. Like, we don't know what's going through so-and-so's head. And there's that additional pressure of like, these guys are counting on me to make sure that that pillar's in the right bloody place. I can't go and talk to them about what's going on at home, or what's going on in work, or what's going on financially, or X, Y, and Z, because their sole role is to create infrastructure, and they're all cogs and they all rely on each other. And if there's a weakness within that, the pressure there just must be, I couldn't even fathom it, what it's actually like for them to be in that situation. So that for me is a big thing, is like, how do we start to do that? And I think it starts with schools. Like, if we can start to have these conversations earlier on, it should be less of a taboo further down the line. So hopefully the work that you're doing sort of starts to touch more people, and we start to see a trickle down into the future and stuff like that. So I'd really like to get, because like I said, this is my first podcast with someone who's not someone that I know on a bit more of a personal level. So I'd like to delve into that a little bit, if you don't mind. We've obviously touched on your expertise and all of the stuff that you're offering, but it'd be really good to, let's start with, like, how are you managing your mental health at the moment? What's your process right now?
Yeah, definitely. So I think what is really good for me is like a sense of routine, which is a bit of a struggle, because the way I work, I either do stuff kind of, whether it's workshop based, it's kind of freelance, or I do some consulting stuff independently, which basically means I don't know what a week's going to look like, a month's going to look like a lot of the time. So routine is a bit of a struggle. But I think it's just that sense of whether it is that kind of really basic cliched stuff, right? Like, go for a walk after lunch if you can, if you're working from home, get away from your screen. Whether it is kind of just, it doesn't have to be a long gym session or whatever else it might be, even if it's just a light bit of exercise each morning. Kind of trying to get my sleep in a good enough state. Yeah, some days I may need to work up particularly early, some days I might be too tired, have a bit of a lie-in. It's kind of that balance between having a routine, so there's just some stuff that if you tick those things off at certain points of the day, you got a bit of structure, a bit of grounding, but also being patient enough with it that, yeah, okay, if you miss something, or you've got to sleep in later or early, or some other reason, it's not all out the window. Sometimes that's writing that down, or put, calendar. Doesn't mean you need to structure your whole life, but like putting even in time to rest is kind of a good way to do it. Because sometimes what we do is we go, okay, well, we've got these 5 things to do in these 5 hours. Let's put them in, boom, boom, boom. But if one of those things you have to do is take a break, go to the gym, eat, these basic things, then at least you're kind of setting yourself up so you haven't got to have the headspace to plan it in a day, because you've already set a bit of like a structure. And so I think that's a great thing for me personally. But like I say, just being flexible enough that might have to change, especially with, originally, obviously, the last couple of years, it's been, can you leave the house, can you not? Now it's been, other changes. So flexibility is also important.
Yeah, It's literally within arm's reach of me, my book. I think this is scribbled on it. That's destroyed spine. Every day, list. But yeah, like you say, there's some that have missed, and it's just new day. It's just that. I guess for me, it's almost writing the list is like a nice leveler as well. It's like, right, do that. Oh, you didn't do that yesterday. Make sure you do that one today. Like that's a big one for me. And the other one for me is that they're all really achievable for me personally. They're not like crazy goals. So like it's like 2 liters of water. Like it's not a huge amount of water. Some people it might be, but some people might not be a lot. Like I just try and do that. I do 10,000 steps, but some people might do 6,000. It's just something that, like you say, it's consistency, and consistency isn't every day. It's consistent. Like if you do something 286 times out of the year, that's quite consistent. It'd be in the high 90s of percentage. So yeah, it's that for me is a big thing. How about your personal journey with mental health? Has there ever been a situation in your life where you've had to take a step back and assess and sort of gone down a darker path, shall we say?
Yeah, I think definitely. I think certainly when I was changing careers, there was this idea that I was kind of on this treadmill, I guess, from school to uni to whatever else, where it was kind of this very much the survival mode than anything else. Okay, get the A levels you need to get, and this is like a typical story for a lot of people. Make it through uni, and then get a job, keep the job, and like we say, kind of COVID was a break in that, where there was a bit less pressure, where you could sit back, but there were definitely cracks that were papered over a lot of the way. So I think at A level, I resat all of my sort of exams from the first year of that in the second year, and just about got the grades I had to go in, so I didn't have a chance to stop. I was like, okay, it's fine. And then uni as well, I was able to I had loads of pressure in kind of my final years, and again I was able to repeat some exams, kind of spoke to the welfare, papered over again because I was able to do that, got enough grades to get something that looked good enough, got a job and so on, and I guess kept papering over cracks. I think that actually delayed the opportunity for me to really look and be like, no, I've actually just been kind of burning out a long way through, and I just got these lucky breaks or these coping mechanisms or people around me that have helped me through. But the older you get, the more it's just on you. The less sort of like life hacks you can put in place, if that makes sense. And I think that's when this thing of like you've got to earn money really came into on your own back sort of thing. There's no system around you. If you get fired, then there's bills to pay, all that sort of stuff came into play for me. And I think, the pressure of doing a lot of the initiative-based stuff, I'm kind of doing workshops with these people, creating my own thing here. You spoke about starting your own business. I started doing a lot of that stuff for the last few years. It's burned me out quite significantly, where I've had to sort of take, months at a time out of doing things, and kind of get back on that horse. And a lot of that is driven by financial needs. I think at the end of uni, I started medication for ADHD, and the problem with it is that it slows you down a little bit so you can focus on one thing, but it also kind of it helps you with motivation, so you wouldn't otherwise be doing nothing, but it also keeps you quite stressed. It's kind of like a natural anxiety. It's kind of like an induced anxiety. So I was just really, really, really burning out there, and I think I'm slowly paying for it in just like worse sleep, poor recovery over the last sort of year or so. But luckily, I've not had a point where I've not had anyone around me where that's completely fallen through. I think there have been a few difficult things growing up. So when I was it's about 10, just over 10 years ago. So I have a stepdad and family at home with half siblings and things like that. but my kind of what would be my biological dad passed away, and that was something I never really stopped to properly kind of process and think through. But I was lucky enough that I was able to speak to a counsellor at school. So again, I've kind of had enough luck and people around me to support me through things. But I think as a man, a lot of the time, you don't really feel that you can stop and just process it all. Because like you say, in that analogy of the guy with the crane, you think once you do, it's all going to lay you out for whatever period of time. Which is why I'm trying to put in these, we're talking about habits, stuff about writing stuff down, speaking to more people. So that's been my journey so far. Like I say, some lows that I've been able to kind of luckily pick back up.
Yeah, I think the first podcast I did was with Matt, who's a good friend of mine from uni, and that's another key skill that we talked about, and I think you're giving people the facility to do, which is sort of spotting that fall. I think if you can spot that fall and you can start to put things into place, whether it's you spotting that or whether it's, like you said, you were lucky to have a counsellor at a younger age. Obviously at 10 you'd struggle to come to that on your own conclusion. So as long as you're able to try and pinpoint falls, I think that's when you can have a really good relationship with mental health, and you're able to work on your mental health, because it's never going to be, right, I'm going to just write stuff down today, mental health sorted. It's like going to the gym. It's like dieting. It's an everyday thing. It needs constant work. So yeah, I think you may have been fortunate, but you've had your own experiences, which is great to see. So you touched on it a little bit, and this for me is a topical question, I guess. We've touched on it a bit as well. But how are you coping with societal pressures? So you've now gone, I guess you're hopefully going to turn this into a bit more of a like, this is your career. Sorry, you've taken that plunge, and that's your vision. You've now stepped away from that safe haven of the degree and what that looks like. You've got a partner. Any pressures coming from there? Instagram, any pressures? Friends, pressures? Like, it all starts to boil up. So yeah, how are you coping with societal pressures as a person?
Yeah, it's a big question, and it's a good question. And I think, obviously now kind of with I think we touched on it a little bit, like you were saying, but the cost of living situation they're in, I think there is a certain amount of guilt that comes from the fact that, as I say, I feel my life has been kind of by transitions and ups and downs, where I've been lucky to sort of almost, as I say, that idea of surviving them, where I feel like almost pressure of, I should be working in the sort of careers that make me the most money, so that whether it's my family, it's my partner, doesn't, that I can look after them and they'll be fine, because I have the degree, I have the background to be earning jobs, earning money, and whether it's kind of like in a more of a commercial role, engineering, whatever else. So me taking the risks of whether it's in entrepreneurial business type stuff or lower paid kind of education or mental health stuff, it's almost selfish in a sense, because I could be getting those jobs where I'm not putting them under any sort of pressure and whatever else. And it's a battle, because some of that is based from societal pressures that are very much unfair and kind of too gendered and things like that. Some of it is based on financial realities, in that I have responsibility to pay rent, to make some savings, so I'm not dependent on people in the future in general. So it's kind of just trying to find a balance for me of, okay, if it gets to a certain point where I do need to take on more responsibility, work that much harder, take jobs I'm not quite as passionate about but earn that much money, where is that line? But also know, okay, if I am keeping up to a certain amount of responsibility personally, then I can afford to put some of myself into passions. And that's a very blurred line, I think, is, well, I'm going to say, I think it's men. Because a lot of people don't have the options, which again is a bit of a unique thing. People like, oh, my dad did this and his dad did this, so I'm going to do this. And so yeah, it's a weird thing to navigate, but it's definitely by the same sort of pressures, I think, of finance and expectations that people can resonate with.
Yeah, it's such a balance. It's such a tricky. It's just like you said. You hit the nail on the head. The path that you have chosen and the path that I have chosen is inherently selfish, and maybe from a typical stereotypical man role, we probably fall short in the sense of, like you say, is like, well, why am I not picking up XYZ job to make sure that I maximize my monthly revenue for the household every month, and you almost have to sacrifice your dreams, but to be that figurehead in that role. But I think thankfully we're moving into a place where it's more accepted. And if you, again, this goes all the way back to what I was saying about that 1%, and like, you can be self-employed, you can be a business owner, and you can earn a, an okay wage. You don't have to strive to be. Not every business is going to be a multi-million, multi-billion pound business. So it's just finding your comfort, because, like you say, you might burn yourself out getting to 500k a year, and it's like, I don't dare take a step over that line, because I know that could just crush it all. Or you might just be tunnel vision and just want to go the full way and the full vision, and that's something that I've started to think about a lot more, because my first business was a tech app, and the main vision in my head was like, this is $1 billion idea. I'm going to be a billionaire. The app doesn't exist, so I'm not a billionaire. But now I'm on to my fourth business. We've got a very sensible business model. We have a vision. We have a goal, and that's it. Really, it's not like we're not trying to change the world. We're just enjoying what we're doing. So yeah, it's interesting. What about friends and family? Like, let's go a bit more personal. Marriage, kids, that sort of thing. Is that something that's coming your way yet? Because for me, I've got friends that are having kids and stuff, and that's starting to become a pressure.
Yeah, I think so. Right now, I live with my girlfriend. So yeah, so we cannot not at that stage of marriage yet, but we've been together for 6 years. And then again, so no kids as well. My sense of family, don't live too far away from them. They very much grew up with a situation where they transitioned massively from not having much to kind of their hard work paid off for them in terms of money, which was able to kind of throughout my life change the impact of how I was able to live my life, and they want the same for me to kind of have a similar path. I think there is a pressure, because even though my girlfriend, she works, she'll have a career of her own, kind of thing like that. Obviously, there's a certain extent her idea of, okay, before thinking of marriage, kids, buying houses, and all that sort of stuff, as I kind of go towards my later end of my 20s and 30s and stuff, it's having not so much a certain amount of money, but a consistent thing. Because I think that's the other end of it, right? It's not so much what you can end in your peaks and troughs if you have that kind of path at this point in time. It's, okay, but can I bet on you in 5 years or 10 years to be reliable or consistent, and that sort of thing. And whether it's as a business owner, as you say, whether it's just a career that's of that nature, yeah, it's harder because you can't say that for yourself, which is scary. But it also feels irresponsible when you think you're going to be responsible for other people, vulnerable people like kids. And so I think for me, yeah, it's a big battle. And what I want to pull everything to is that more conventional, stable base of being a therapist. But again, that takes more training and stuff like that. So I think I'm in a transition period where I'm like, okay, if I can make this something in the next couple of years, where I'm able to get a basis where I can reliably earn a certain amount of money, that I'll keep down this path. But I have to be open, I feel, because either way, for me, the most important thing that I want is to be that family-orientated person, with my partner, with a future family, and that'd be the most important thing. But I'm hoping I can do it. I can support that with a career that I love. But being with them and supporting them will be, I think for me, is like my North Star, to use a phrase used earlier. And I also have that sense, I think everyone pretends they don't, or maybe they're more honest with it, about making your parents kind of proud, or making them feel that they're kind of, the life they've given you, you kind of are, you're making something of it. So it's battling a lot of things, but I can know personally it's really important for me to be that person who's give my family the best situation.
Amazing. So it's there, the pressure's there. You're wanting to work with it, which is great. You're not letting it dictate you, which is the most important thing. Yeah. So Jeremy, I'll leave the last thought with you. Is there anything is there any way you want to point people to, or anything that you want to sort of promote a little bit, and then we'll go into a final thought after that. But yeah, go on.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So, firstly, thank you for having me on today. I've really enjoyed the conversation. I think if just in terms of me personally and promoting anything, as the charity that I mentioned quite a bit today in terms of working with schools and universities and things like that, it's called Beyond Equality. So check them out, whether if you're involved in a school or just interested to see what the charity does, maybe even donate. They're a great charity. And then what I do personally is through a business called Mastery Academy. So that's to do with mentoring. Because I think mentoring and community-based stuff is so important, whether it's for men or in general with mental health, to have people who have had an experience before you, to have another sense of community. So whether that's through me or in general, I'd really recommend that. Any sort of, as I say, kind of space for community is important. So yeah, that's where I'd kind of promote or leave it to. But thank you so much.
Amazing. I will put some links in the description so people can find them as well. And then I guess the final question is there a couple of sentences that you just sort of want to sum up, or anything that you want people to get out of this, or get out of the next step for men's mental health almost? What's your sort of goal with it and that sort of side of things?
Definitely. I think understand what being a man means to you. Try and feel more open to remove stuff that isn't serving you, but don't feel ashamed, and maybe even feel a sense of pride for things that you feel are serving you and actually serving others that you care about, friends, family, whoever they might be, and really use that as your kind of compass to get the right balance right between, like I say, these sort of negative pressures, but also a sense of personal responsibility and community responsibility, career, and otherwise.
Amazing. Jeremy, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Really insightful. Thoroughly enjoyed this one. Bit different. And for me, I learned a lot more, which is really good, and I'm really grateful for. So thank you so much for your time.
Really appreciate it. Thank you.